right. Well, it is 12 p.m. and at least in Central Standard Time. I forget there are people other places. Thank you so much for being with us. As one of your FDI committee group, I want to welcome you today. And I also have the honor of introducing Dr. Kipi Fleming. So as the holidays are getting closer, and so is that anticipation of the good food, but also sometimes for people, anticipation of the hard things that you have to do with family. And so we're going to talk today about conflict within the family. And I think you're going to be blessed by this. I want to say a little prayer over Dr. Fleming as she gets started, and then I'll introduce her. God, thank you for your peace. And I ask for all of ACU's faculty and staff that we can step into the spaces of family conflict and be bold with light and life and peace. And I just bless our time here together and bless Dr. Fleming as she talks to us about this. Amen. All right. So most of you know Dr. Fleming, but those of you who don't, she is the Conflict Management Program Director and also an Associate Professor for ACU Dallas. So she originally got her BS degree in education and taught in public schools before getting her master's in conflict resolution and later going, and those are both for ACU, later getting her doctorate from Nova Southeastern University in 2015, and her doctorate was in conflict analysis and resolution. So one of the things that she has been interested in all these years is the biblical interpretation, of how do we do conflict right? I mean, whether that is family conflict, marital conflict, as a mediator, she works with families in divorce and custody disputes through our court system. She also teaches in our churches, in our schools. She loves helping people through conflict and loves giving her knowledge and just experience in all that to her students and equipping them to go out into their families and their work in order to do conflict better and do it God's way. And so I'm just looking forward to what she has to share with us today. Dr. Fleming.
Thank you, Brenda. I know it's weird to say I love conflict because I really don't. I'm a conflict avoider, and I've had to learn to do it differently. So all of us, if we're human and we deal with humans, we have conflict. And it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that family conflict tends to come up more often than any other. The people that we're closest to are the ones we tend to have the most conflict with. And because of that, if we're all getting together for the holidays, sometimes, this is how we, let's see if I can get that to move. All right, it doesn't want to move. I don't know why it's not moving.
Give me a minute. I think maybe if I go back and make you host, it might be able to do it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I took the host from you.
Okay. We ran through this, didn't we, Brenda?
Okay, try it now.
We know it worked before. No.
Still not working?
Still not working.
Try unsharing your screen and then sharing it again as the host.
Okay. Stop share. Sorry, guys, we really did work on this. Didn't this happen before?
I think it's a Brenda curse. Because it happened last time too.
I'm never hosting again.
There we go.
And we practiced last time too.
We did. Awesome. We practiced. Okay, so this is how we imagine the holidays. Everybody's happy. Everybody's together. And you know what? It does happen this way a lot of times. But when we all get together, there's some of us that have that dread that our holiday time is going to look more like this, right? I mean, let's do it. Let's do a really quick poll here.
Can you
How
share the
many
screen,
of-
Kippy?
I'm sorry,
Can you share the screen?
I
It's
am
not showing
sharing the
up for us.
screen. Darn. I was sharing the screen, I thought. There we go. All right, so let's try this again. Slideshow. All right, so here's what we want it to look like. Here's what it looks like in our imagination, in our longing. This is the way we want our family to look. But it often looks like this instead, right? So now let's do a poll. How many of you have experienced family conflict during the holidays or an important family event like a wedding, a graduation, a big birthday party, all of those things? How many of you have experienced conflict in your family? And by the way, I like to teach in a very interactive way, so that if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and Brenda's going to keep up with that for me. I can't actually see the chat, but if you will, if you have a question, put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask it, because that's just the way I teach. So, all right. So what is our poll looking like?
You'll have to launch it because you're the host now.
Oh, okay. Polls. There we go. Oh my goodness. Look at, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's going 100%. So all of us have experienced that downer sort of a family conflict when we're all together. So thanks so much for participating in that. I'm gonna get rid of that. So I'm also going in two different directions here. Let me ask a question. Well, it's not letting me go again. Am I still the host? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're still the
Yeah.
host.
Okay, because I couldn't hear anyone and I can no longer,
Can you hear me, Kippy?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, we can hear you and we can see the thing, but it's still on the poll slide. And maybe
Yeah.
do it without slides. I don't know.
All right, let's just do it this way. Well, all right, let's stop.
Try just doing it in presentation mode. Some of my students have had trouble
Yeah,
doing it in
Okay.
slideshow mode. I don't know if that'll work or not, but
well, it worked yesterday. I'm sorry, guys, that's really frustrating.
do it in the mode where you still see your slide deck on the left and the main
Mhm.
picture in front and see if that works.
All right, let's do it this way. All right, let's try sharing again. Okay. Can you guys see this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so question. Why is family conflict so hurtful, so destructive? In other words, why do we hurt the ones we love? And why do they hurt us? Before I get into what I think is the main culprit of family conflict, I would be interested to know what you think is behind family conflict. In a couple of words, if you would put your ideas into the comments. What is it? Why is conflict within our families so much, seemingly so much more hurtful or so much more damaging, can be, than say conflict with friends or conflict at work? Those can also be damaging and hurtful, but why is it with family that it's so difficult? Expectations, okay? We care deeply about, we care deeply about our relationships. We know each other too well. You can walk away from a stranger, but yeah, your family is your family. You don't get to choose them, right? We take them for granted, or we take for granted they'll always be there. We want to be accepted by family. Yeah, it's personal. Expectations, unmet expectations. You guys are so on to this. I mean, you're doing my presentation for me. All right. So let me kind of sum all this up, everything that you guys said, and put it in one word. If I can, but I can't. Oh, all right. One word, identity. Okay. Identity, I believe, is what is beneath all of these things. Our identity is how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen by other people. And our identity is composed of both personal, individual elements of our identity, but it's also there are group elements to our identity as well. And so let's see, I may just have to keep going back and forth. Brenda, let's see if are you going to share? It says you've started screen sharing. Oh, there it is. All right, maybe if you share while I do this. All right, so our identity is, I think, at the heart of everything that leads to conflict. So identity is important because it helps us find meaning in life. Our psyche understands how we fit in the world by how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen by others. So identity is essential to our psychological well-being. We have to understand who we are, and who we are is who we are in relation to other people. We are social creatures. And so I understand myself because I understand how I relate to you. And with family, that gets to be even more important because we grow up in family, and most of our basic identities are rooted in family. So one of my favorite authors is Daniel Shapiro. And Brenda, if you'll go to the next slide, Shapiro has what he calls, or he says identity, the full spectrum of persistent and fleeting characteristics that define who you are. And so he provides us with what he calls 5 pillars of identity. I actually call them 5 categories. And so let's go to the next slide, Brenda. Thank you. Is it not going? Okay, so the 5 pillars. Let's just talk about the 5 pillars. There we go. All right. So here are his 5 pillars. First of all, beliefs. He says that beliefs, or he defines it as specific ideas that you as a human being hold to be true. That's pretty straightforward and simple. The second pillar is rituals, which he says are, quote, personally meaningful customs and ceremonial acts. And he goes into a little more detail. And he notes that 2 examples of rituals are holidays and evening dinner with the family. You could add going to church, praying, taking family vacations. All of those things are centered around family. The third pillar is allegiances, loyalty to groups or individuals. Now, think about that in terms of family and how important loyalty is seen within a family. The third value is, the third pillar is fourth pillar is values. And he defines this as guiding principles and overarching ideals. These would be seen as single words like justice, integrity, loyalty, freedom. And then finally, the fifth pillar is emotionally meaningful experiences. Again, think about this in terms of family. He says that these are intense events that can be either positive or negative. So think about it as your wedding day or the day your divorce was final. Positive, negative. Also think about the day that your child was born or the day that you lost someone that was very important to you. So emotionally meaningful experiences can be all along the emotional spectrum, positive and negative. So let's think about all five of these in terms of family. We almost all of us learn our beliefs. The family teaches us beliefs. We learn those beliefs as we grow up in our family, no matter if they're, beliefs of faith or other things. We learn those in our family. We develop rituals within our family loyalty, allegiances, but not only allegiances to the family, but that's also where we almost always learn allegiances to other groups that we're a part of. And then values, most of us learn those one-word values in our families. And of course, our family is full of emotionally meaningful experiences. So if, again, we think about all these as in terms of family, I think you can see where all of these things are, they're centered in that first relationship, those first relationships that we have with our parents, with our siblings, with our extended family as well. All right. Brenda, let's go on to the next slide, if we're able. All
No,
right.
It's not letting me.
No.
I'm still
Okay.
working on
All right. What I want us to do, like I said, I like to teach interactively. If I am going to think about what my identity, what is it that composes my identity? And by the way, our identities are not monolithic. They're not just one thing. Oh, good. Here sort of comes my list. All right. So I just, in a few minutes, sat down and thought, okay, what is it that, or how is it that I see myself? What groups am I a part of? What's important to me? Deeply held values. And what makes me who I am and how I want to be seen by other people. So that was mine. All right. So what I would like for you to do is I want you to take a few minutes. We'll give you like 3 minutes. I would like for you to create an identity list of your own. Okay. It may not be as extensive as this, but I'd like for you to think reflectively, how is it that I want to be seen by other people? And who is it that I relate to? So take a few minutes, create an identity list for yourself. And if you feel like sharing, you're more than welcome to share that in the comments. So take about 3 minutes. Brenda, if we can, let's go back up just so everybody can kind of see mine and maybe give them some ideas about, maybe trigger some thoughts that might help everybody think about different aspects of their identity. Yeah, there we go. Okay, another minute ought to be good. Okay, thanks everybody for, thinking through that. There we go. If we look back at my slide that I had all mine up there, it looks like I've just kind of thrown everything up on the wall. And that's a great way to get started. But if you look at those, and if I look at those, I know that there are certain elements of my identity that are much more important to me. That what Shapiro calls our core identity. If you think of yourself as, so we have the definition here of Shapiro's core identity, the specific elements of our identity that we hold closest and they most define us and how we want to be seen by others. So, if you think of yourself as a sphere, and there's, like the earth has a core, the earth has the very center of the earth. Our core identities are those that most define us. And if I'm looking at mine, I'm probably looking at woman, mom, grandmother, Christian, etc. Okay, so when I do this with my students, I have them draw these out in concentric circles. Notice that as I go farther and farther out, those things that are on the outside are probably not as important to me. They're still important. They still help define who I am and what I enjoy and how I see myself, but they're probably not as vulnerable as the ones that are in that middle, in the center, in the core. And I've given this example before, so if you've heard it, you can ignore this part. But if I think of myself as a mom, and I do, of course, I've got 3 girls. If someone says something that I interpret, my perception, whether or not they meant it that way or not, I interpret as derogatory to my parenting skills, that's going to hit me a lot differently than if someone says, you might want to mow your lawn. Okay. Because I hate to mow the lawn and I don't like yard work. But I don't want to have the worst house on the block. I don't want to have the worst yard on the block. So I'll make sure it gets done. But that's probably not going to hit me the same way that an insult or a perceived insult to my parenting skills is going to make. So those elements of our core, when those are hurt, when those are damaged, we have a reaction to that. And Brenda, let's go to the next slide. There we go. There's all of them. Okay. So what I want you to do, I showed you what my core was. I'd like you to look back to that list that you made yourself and think about what would you put in your core? What is it at the very center of who you are that makes you who you are. You know, usually they're 4 or 5 maybe, and those are going to be pretty consistent throughout your life. But they might float in and out some of those circles a little bit. But what is it? What would you list as your 4 or 5 core identity elements? And again, please feel free to put yours in the chat if you feel comfortable with that. You're not required, but feel free to share if you'd like. What are your 4 or 5 cores? And as you're thinking about that, think about how each one of those core elements have to do with family and family relationships, since that's our topic today. And his wife, mother, Christian sister. And 3 of the 4 that you put in there, and even Christian, all have to do with family. Dina says Christ follower, rural background, mom, wife, servant. Lots of family in there. Okay, so again, thanks for participating on that, or in that. So when those core elements, one of those core elements is impacted by something someone says or does, whether or not that was their intent, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but it doesn't matter if they didn't mean it that way. It impacts my sense of self, my core sense of self. What happens? What happens to us when something in our center, in our core, is hurt? It's automatic, it's instinctual, and we can't stop this. We can't stop this reaction. This is an internal part of us. Okay, so Brenda, would you let's go to the next slide. There we go. All right. So what happens? I've talked about the conflict triad before. We're going to talk about 2 of the elements today, not all 3 of them. We can talk about that at a different time, number 3. But in the conflict triad, when an identity, a deeply held value, or especially with family, high or specific expectations, all 3 of those are all interrelated. When one of those is impacted, we have an internal emotional response. We have a gut instinct. It's almost that flight, fight, or freeze instinct that we feel it. Think about the last time. Again, I'm asking you guys to interact here. You don't have to put anything in the chat, but think about this. Think about the last time. Look at that list of core identities and maybe pick 1 or 2 that is the most important, and think about the last time that you felt like that one of those was insulted, was hurt, was damaged, or impacted by something someone said or did. If you're like me, you probably feel that same feeling that you felt at the time. It's a gut instinct. It is an emotional reaction to an identity threat. And again, we can't stop it. We can't stop having the reaction. Now we're going to talk about how we act on that reaction. Okay. But we have this emotional response. And anybody want to guess what the number one response probably is? What is that emotion that we feel? Well, almost always It's anger. Thank you, Dina. Yeah, anger. But guess what, guys? Anger is a secondary emotion. Anger always covers for something else. We don't get angry and just to be angry. Anger covers for other things. Anger covers for frustration, hurt, sorrow, disappointment, embarrassment. Anger covers for something. And so think about this for yourself, but think about it for, coming from other people too. When we as human beings experience anger, we need to think about what's driving that anger. It's something else. And again, think about family, thinking about sitting around that Thanksgiving table and someone says something that you have that reaction to. While we may act out in anger, it's actually covering for something else. So we think about that. And I like what another favorite author of mine, Jonathan Haidt, wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. If you've never read anything by Haidt, I would highly recommend them. In The Happiness Hypothesis, he describes emotional responses as an elephant. And he says the elephant is powerful, he's big, and he can be very destructive. But he says the elephant, we as humans, our elephant, our emotions have a rider. And the rider is our reason, it's our logic, it's the higher level thinking part of us. And he points out that the elephant's always going to be stronger. The elephant will always be more powerful. He's always going to be bigger, but the rider has to be in charge. Because if the elephant takes over, he's going to destroy everything in his path. And again, think back to conflict that you may have experienced where emotions took over the situation, whether it was your emotions or someone else's. Think about decisions that you have made when you were emotional. Has anybody, and I would really be interested in this. Does anybody feel, and I'm not saying you absolutely can't make a good decision when you're emotional, but how many of you have ever made good decisions when you were highly emotional? Anybody? Anybody ever made bad decisions when your emotions were, when the elephant was in control? I can raise my hand on that one. I absolutely have made bad decisions when I let the elephant take over and the rider was just desperately trying to hang on and not be destroyed. I love the elephant and the rider illustration because to me it is so, it makes so much sense to me. And it's something that I can see happening in people's lives when I'm working with people in divorce, with couples in divorce in mediations. I see sometimes that elephant take over, and things are destroyed when the elephant is in charge. And Stone et al., I used to saying Stone, Patton, and Heen, also wrote a book called Difficult Conversations. And some of you may be familiar with that book. It's a great book. But one of the quotes that I love from that book is, have your emotions or they will have you. We as the writer have got to learn how to appreciate the power of the elephant. We have to learn how to control the elephant. We have to learn how he works and how we can best use his power, because no one is saying, God gave us these emotions. The problem happens when the emotions take over and our primitive self is in charge instead of our higher level thinking self. And so we're not saying get rid of the emotions. Emotional intelligence is about understanding and learning from your emotions and learning how to best use them rather than letting them take over. I mean, you think about it. Jesus, when he walked into the temple and saw all the money changers, he became angry and he overturned the tables. And now the question is, was his elephant in charge or was his rider in charge? I would argue that the rider was in charge. Nobody is saying you should never get angry, that you should never have emotions. We have to learn how to control them. We have to learn what they mean and where they're coming from and what's driving them. And so when I'm sitting down at that Thanksgiving table and that crazy uncle across the table says something so outlandish that it's so insulting to me, or it hits me wrong because maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe he did. Some people are not nice. We have to remember that some people just aren't. They're not good people. But most of the time, people don't mean to hurt us. They don't mean to insult us. But crazy Uncle Larry over there on the other side of the table says something that I feel that emotional response. And so what we have to do is we have to learn how to realize, okay, this is what just happened, and I'm not going to react based on my emotion. I can still act because I think that's what Jesus did. His turning over the tables was not a reaction in anger. It was an action taken that was very deliberate and had a very specific purpose. And by the way, when I was getting ready for this presentation, I searched, I did a Google search. I think I searched something like annoying family members. Okay. There are some websites out there that will have examples of really great comebacks to things that people say at the Thanksgiving table. Please don't do those. It's not relationship building, but I mean, it might get a laugh or two, but they're damaging. And that kind of makes me sad that there are websites out there that tell you, well, here's a good comeback if your, great Aunt Sally says this to you at the Thanksgiving table. But that's kind of the world we live in. But let's not be that. Let's try better to at least understand ourselves, even if we have trouble understanding where other people are coming from. So what are some takeaways from today? First of all, if it moves. Takeaway number 1. Intent does not equal impact. Just because crazy Uncle Larry says something he thought maybe was funny, his intent was humor, but the way it impacts me is anything but funny. I need to realize that just because it stung me doesn't mean that that's the way that he intended it. Does he need to be more sensitive? Of course. But guys, we can't change anybody else but ourselves. I can't change crazy Uncle Larry, but I can try to mitigate the emotional response that I have by understanding that just because it hit me that way doesn't mean that that's the way it was intended. And by the way, guys, that works in 2 directions. That goes the other way as well. Sometimes maybe I say something, this ever happened to you? I say something and it hurts somebody else. And you're going, oh my goodness, I didn't mean that. I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant. Okay. We understand when other people don't see things or accept things or feel things the way we intended them. That one's really almost always easy for us. A lot of times it's harder the other way around. When someone else says something that hit us wrong, it didn't land right. It didn't land the way they thought it was going to. And I do what not Shapiro, but Stone, Patton, and Heen called the intention invention. I assume that because it hurt me, they meant to hurt me. And that's not always the case. So we need to give people grace. We need to give ourselves grace And we need to give other people grace as well. Just because it hurt me doesn't mean that's the way it was intended. And so I need to be open to that thought. Okay, next slide. Please, please be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. We live in a society right now, real time, where people will not give others the benefit of the doubt. We have what Stone et al. Call the truth assumption. We hear what other people say and we don't like it. And so we assume we have all the answers and we know all the truth. When really we're only seeing things from one perspective. So again, when someone says something or does something that we go, what were they thinking? Why would they say something like that? Or I can't believe they said that or that they did that. And it hurt me so much. Give people the benefit of the doubt. I think if there's anything as Christians, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We have to. And we have to be willing to give them grace and think, just because it hurt me or just because it sounded this way, I've got to believe that maybe this isn't the way they meant it. Because a lot of times that's the truth. People, I don't think, maybe I have too much faith in humanity, but I don't think people go around trying to hurt people all the time. I think for the most part, people's intentions are good. But when things don't come across the way that they were intended, or they're just, for whatever reason, it hits one of those identity elements for me, and I have that emotional response, I've got to say, they didn't mean it that way, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Because guys, I want people to give me the benefit of the doubt. And so we've got to turn that around and be willing to do that as well. Next slide. Okay. Anybody that knows me really well knows that I love Peanuts. My dad used to read the Peanuts cartoons to us every night. It was wonderful. It's just part of my, it's one of those deeply held values, but emotionally meaningful experiences. I love Peanuts. Lucy is the perfect example here of what we call fundamental attribution error. Let's read this. So Linus says, "Why are you always so anxious to criticize me?" And Lucy responds, I just think I have a knack for seeing other people's faults." And Linus says, "What about your own faults?" And she says, "I have a knack for overlooking them." And that is what we call fundamental attribution error. It's easy for us to see what everybody else does wrong. It's easy to overlook what we do wrong because we had good intentions, right? So if they take it wrong, it's their fault. No, that's just not the way it works. It's not the way it works. We need to be open to the fact that sometimes I hurt others even unintentionally. So one of my favorite illustrations using Peanuts. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Takeaway number 3, seek understanding, not agreement. If my goal going into whatever situation it is, if I want to make sure that they see my side of this and they come out agreeing with me, we're never going to have peace. We're never going to find peace. How many of you have ever been convinced of something because someone argued you into it? Anybody? I know for me, it doesn't work that way. The more you argue about why you're right, the more convinced I'm the one that's right. And I see you as unintelligent or, crazy or whatever. Arguing someone into agreement doesn't happen. We need to be willing to seek understanding where the other person is coming from, understanding that their experiences are different than mine. And their values may be different than mine. Their expectations are different than mine. Now, this is something else I tell my students. Just because I want to try to understand you doesn't mean that I have to change my mind. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that we're different. And if I go into a situation with all my family at the Thanksgiving table, or with my boss, or with my friends at church, or whoever it is, if we have this problem going on, if I go into seeking resolution through understanding, it's easier for them to be open to my thoughts if I'm willing to listen to theirs. Again, it doesn't mean that either one of us have to change our minds, but be open to the idea that there are other ways of looking at it than maybe just my own. Seek understanding, not agreement. One of my favorite verses, and actually, I even have it on my ACU. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's on my mug right here. Turn from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. When I was first putting one of my courses together, I had this verse, and I went to Ben Reese, and I don't think Ben's here today, but I said, Ben, what does the word pursue in this verse mean? What is, I mean, because it says seek peace and pursue it. What is that? And so he said, I'll get back to you. So a couple of days later, he came back and said, the Hebrew word that's used here means to run after something you greatly desire. Wow. What that taught me, what that told me, is that godly peace doesn't happen by accident. Godly peace is active. It isn't passive. It doesn't just, we don't just luckily fall into peace. Godly peace is something that we do. It isn't something that happens to us. And we're talking about peace with one another. And to me, this changed everything. When I grew up thinking, okay, I'm just going to pretend like everything's okay, and that's peace. Guys, that is not peace. That causes all kinds of problems. If we don't recognize our emotions and work on our emotions and work with other people, we just clamp all of that emotion and all of that resentment and all of that hurt. We just clamp it down farther and farther inside of us. At some point, it's all going to come out. Pretending like everything is okay is not peace. Godly peace takes skill. And guess what, guys? It's a skill you can learn, because we have an entire master's program on learning how to make peace, because it is something that everybody can learn. And I am so passionate about teaching others what's involved in the peacemaking process. And then finally, last takeaway, you can only change you. You can't change other people. You can't make crazy Uncle Larry see your side. You can't make him a nice person. You can only change you, and you can change how you deal with other people. Now, this doesn't mean that you always put yourself in a bad situation. Sometimes there are bad situations that you don't want to be in. But in general, with most people, you're not going to be able to change them, but you can change how you perceive them. You can change how you act on the emotions that something they say may cause you. You can only change you. And then finally, I think we just have a question slide. If anybody has any questions or any thoughts, I would love to hear what you have to say. Again, I'm super, super passionate about this topic, and I can talk all day long on it. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you, John. Well, guys,
Well, I think
thanks so much for
everybody
being
can,
here.
I was going to say, everybody can see how passionate Kipi really is about peace and helping us walk through that. And this is a hard time of year in dealing with family and with just people having hard conversations. I think sometimes that conflict that family has then prompts them to talk to a friend or to talk to a teacher and we've got, I mean, I would just give a pitch. You have the space to be able to impact peace in other people's lives because you have your students that you interact with, because you have colleagues that you talk to, that you've got people at church. And those spaces where we can help people manage their emotion and then figure out what to say and do is just so important. Thank you so much, Kipi, for what you shared with us today. So we are at the end of today, and we're ending a little bit early. Does anybody have any other questions or anything they else want to? We've got lots of thank yous in the notes for what you shared today. But I appreciate everybody's time. And Megan or Dina, do you have anything to share about December? I think that the date for December's meeting is the December 8th, if I'm correct. And that will be Stephanie Wanamaker. So please join us for that. Appreciate everybody's time today.
John, you're going to enjoy that book. It's great. He has another one, just by the way, called Why Good People Are Divided. Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. There's a good book right there. It's actually really, really interesting. So anything he writes is great. Thanks so much.